In this video, we're going to take a look at some more features of pivot tables in Excel. We have a simple data table here that has a last name, a first name. Department has some repeating values in it, so we can group on that. Job code also has repeating values in it, so we can group on that. It's possible you might have repeating values in the age column, but that's something we're not going to be grouping on. We don't have any repeating values with this particular instance anyway. It would also be possible you might have some repeating values for salary, but we're not going to worry about that in this example either. So we're going to look at grouping either on department or job code or both. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make this into a pivot table. So click on Insert and go to Pivot Table. And it should correctly select the data for us if we're in the data to begin with, and check out the dancing green line and we're good. Click on OK. And now we've got our pivot table template. And what we're going to start off with is we're going to click on Department. And I want to know what my total payroll cost is for each department. So click on Current Salary. And you notice Department went into the rows box down here because it's text. Current salary went into the values box down here because it's a number. And I've got the same problem I always have with pivot tables, and that is it does not format the data, even though you've got it formatted on the underlying table. So we'll just do a little bit of formatting here, add a currency symbol, and get rid of the decimal places. Now the data is a little bit easier to read. Okay, so that's the way pivot tables work by default. If you click on a number field up here, it automatically goes in the values box down here and it tries to add up the numbers. So let's do that with job code, and we get that down here and it's a number and it tries to add them all up, which makes no sense. Those are categories. It also puts a $sign on them. This time I don't want one, and it puts it in. So let's go back to comma here and 0 decimal places, and now we're okay. So it doesn't make any sense at all. These numbers are totally meaningless, but they're numbers, and Excel always wants to add up numbers. So there are some options here, and one option is to go down here and click on the arrow next to Sum of Job Code, and we get this little pop-up. That was a left click, by the way, not a right click. And let's go to Value Field Settings. And there are some options that I have here. The default is always to sum the data, but I can count the data. I can compute the average, the min, the max, and then I've got a few other ones here that are, you're probably a little bit less likely to use. We're just going to look at these first 5. So it's doing the sum right now. The only thing it really makes sense to do for this is to count. Averaging those or finding the minimum or the maximum makes no sense at all, but you can count the field. So let's click on OK. And now it tells me there were 12 people on the original, and I've got 5 people in administration, I've got 3 people in marketing, I've got 4 people in production. So instead of adding up the numbers for me, it will count the numbers. And now I've got something meaningful in this column. Okay. Now let's go over here and take a look at our current salary column. And that's also down here. And let's click on the arrow next to that. Actually, there's another way to do it. Let's just right click on it. And let's choose Value Field Settings. That might be an easier way to get to this dialog box. And it does make sense to do some other things here for salary. We can do count. Click on OK. That should give us the exact same numbers we have over here. Let's right click again and let's do Value Field Settings. And this time, instead of doing the count, let's compute the average salary and click on OK. And now it gives me average salaries by department. Let's try some of the other ones here. Let's right click and go to Value Field Settings, and let's choose the max function, and it will give us the maximum salary in each department. And we'll go back, and one more time we'll right click and we'll do Value Field Settings, and this time we'll choose the min, which will give us the lowest salary in each department. Okay, so there are things that you can do other than just add the numbers up when you work with numbers in a pivot table. Another thing you can do is, let's go down here to the lower right hand corner, and it's counting the job code, and it always puts job code here by default because it's a number, but if you drag it over here, it'll stay over there, and it will now treat those as categories, and each unique number will appear once over here, and each department has somebody in each one of these 3 job categories. And now we're getting the minimum salary for this department and this job code. Okay. Excel is now putting each unique job code under each department, and it appears here that each department has at least one person in each one of the 3 job codes, otherwise the number would not show up. So these are categories now, and we've still got the min function applied. It says min of current salary. And so for these 3, they're the administration group, and their number, the minimum of these minimums is 24,600. For marketing, the minimum of those is 26,500, and for production, the minimum of those is 28,500. And down here it says grand total, but that's not really a total. It's the overall minimum. So this is the lowest salary paid to anybody in any department. Okay. Some other things we can do here. I'm going to just turn everything off over here. And let's take a department. And let's say I want to know how many people are in each department. Well, you know, I could drag current salary down like we did before. I could drag job code down like we did before. But you can also take a label field, a text field, and drag it down to values. And the only thing that makes sense to do with text is you can count how many of them there are. So if I drag department here and drag it over here both, the first one will be treated as a label. The second one will be treated as some data that is to be counted. We've got a $sign there. Let's just go back and format those without any $signs. So I can get a count. Now let's turn both of those off. And I can do the same thing with a numeric field like job code. If I click on job code once, it goes down here, it adds them all up, and I get a sum of 23, which is pretty meaningless. But I can also grab job code again. I can drag it down and put it in this column. And now they're being treated as labels because I'm in the labels, the rows box here. But it's still trying to add them over here on this side. So let's right-click and go to Value Field Settings and tell it to count and click on OK. So if you ever need a count of anything, you can just take whatever it is you're counting and you can drag it down both to the rows box down here and to the values box. And if it's a number field, you may have to go over here and change it to a count. If it's a text field, the only thing you can possibly do with the text field is to count how many entries there are in your data. So those are some other options for computing different functions other than just sum with pivot tables in Excel.